going to make sure it is working. Do, 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 do. Do. Did you hear it echo for a second? Whoop.
I was distracted by Leah's Georgia mug.
Well,
look,
it's subtle bragging.
It's gonna be a thing, and I'm just gonna. I decided not to say anything, but just to drink from the mug. So.
Oh, well, that lasted. Like, I'm not saying anything about Georgia national champion.
42 seconds into the stream.
So it looks like it is coming on. Those of you that are already on, feel free to let us know in the chat where you're coming from and such. I have one more location of streaming that I need to verify, but Cindy, see, look at that.
Hi, Cindy in
Cleveland,
oh my gosh.
Ohio.
That's welcome.
Hey, Cindy, wild technology here. I just learned the word wild, so I feel like I'm behind. Oh.
You just learned the word wild?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oxford. Melbourne. Oh, wait. Oxford.
Edmonton. Ventura. Somebody's close to me.
Oxford, Mississippi.
I know that area well.
How did you just learn the word wild, Leah?
Because I'm 100.
First of all, I think I'm older than you, Leah, so watch out.
Also, okay, here's the deal. I'm 100 in my brain. I'm an elder millennial, and I really lean into the elder part. Like it's
I've started using geriatric millennial as my
I'm trying though, and I always say this, I'm really trying to embrace you guys. I mean, look at this. This is so good.
Oh. Leah, your neighbor's here?
I love that.
Hello, what up? Next door to that's my husband. Oh, he's cooking dinner right now.
at 9 o'clock?
Hey, we Pasadena.
Kids. What? Remember what life was like before you had kids, Tripp?
No, I have a 15-year-old. What?
Well, before that life, you could eat at 9 o'clock.
I was 25 when Elgin arrived.
Bless your heart. But
I understand.
A blessing.
My knit cap is back, but not because I'm in a basement in Edinburgh and it's freezing. Mostly because I got up this morning and drove from St. Simon's Island, Georgia, to my home. So my hair looks like.
I used to go there with my youth group.
Okay. I've spoke there a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm. Fun.
Did you see? I'd have to ask before we really get going. Did you see the weird John Wesley statue there?
Yeah, you can't decide if it's John Wesley or like 17th century Jesus.
Right.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan, for saying we're all kids. I appreciate it.
And Elizabeth, who called us puppies.
We'll take that.
Any young animal.
Well, we were at this event and there, and now that I know y'all were both there growing up, before we get too serious, do you have any like high quality on St. Simon's Island youth group retreat stories that you feel like if you share it you'll be released?
So no, you go ahead, Sarah. Go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, I wasn't ever there as a youth. I only spoke there as an adult.
I was the same. I took my kids whenever I was ordained in the Disciples of Christ. We took our kids there because we're so small. We didn't have any places, so we just sort of like took over other people's. We had Super Wow. Did you ever do Super Wow, Tripp? That was the best.
No.
Super Wow was the summer we would go to like the beaches of the Panhandle.
We went to Fort Caswell. The Baptist campground in Fort Caswell, and then we did like Mission Fuge and Passport. Those were the other Baptist ones.
Go to
anyway,
Gatlinburg made an appearance.
So you could say hi to Dolly.
Dolly, legend.
Yes. All right. Truly. I'm gonna like officially start real quick. That way, I already was sensing the turn towards just hanging out and.
yeah, because I like these people so much. I was like, I don't. Do we have to talk about things, or can we just?
Oh yeah, you're talking. You're talking. You're the expert. You're a practical theologian, Leah.
I know.
All right.
Oh.
Hold on, I'm going to hit the air horn, but it's lower volume than normal. This is a compromise. Some people are like, love the air horn. Others are like, hate the air horn. And I'm like, all right, lower volume. All right, welcome, friends. This is Experiencing God, and we're going to have some fun tonight because, whoa. Sarey and I are joined by a number of our very cool, very nerdy, awesome, excellent friends. Leah Robinson, practical theologian, is in the house. And she is trying to, not so aggressively celebrate the Georgia Bulldogs. Show your glass real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. What are you talking about?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. You're not so much of a bragger.
Did something happen?
Well, yeah. They ruined the national championship game by running dive plays for 20 yards at a piece. But and we're joined.
Go Dogs, Pam. Yes, Pam.
Sarah Heath. Hi, Sarah.
Hello there.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm practically a theologian.
Well,
there's a practical theologian and then practically a theologian.
But what kind of language do you use for your kind of post congregational status? You say like you're lapsed clergy.
I'm in Rev recovery. It's funny because I work as a consultant and a coach, but it's really hard to figure out like how to say what I do. But I work currently on staff of a coffee company as they are like leadership developer and admin director, but it's part-time as well as coaching folks and whatnot. So it's always hard to explain, but guys, this is the first time in my life I've got to tell people what I do and it's not ministry. Mm-hmm. It is. I was at a wedding last weekend and I was explaining what I do. It was the best. People don't react at all. They're like, oh, you work for a coffee company? That's awesome. Coffee company turns out less like controversial than being the reverend. So there it is.
Ooh. And for people listening and knowing that each week we've been getting different scholars that were that did keynotes at Theology Beer Camp. There are 11 of them, Leah Robinson being one, but also we had a host of our favorite God Pods. You are polyamorous. Is that a word? You're on a multiplicity of podcasts?
It's true. I'm on a couple of podcasts.
Oh my God, I've never heard
Dan
that.
is a question, where's Kevin? We don't know. We've texted him and emailed him. I bet he shows up somewhere halfway through this.
Probably here and also not here is the answer Kevin would give us.
Kevin's one of my favorites. I was waiting.
Yeah. We do a lot of things together and I can tell you, it is always a surprise.
Well, but you need to give a shout out to the multiplicity.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I currently do Rev Recovery, which is for folks who used to be in ministry or folks who were volunteers and whatever. So it's a conversation about what is life like after the stained glass window or outside of the stained glass window. How do you get a job when the only thing you have on your resume is like lead pastor? Other than like working for a tech firm or starting your own cult, sometimes it's hard to figure out what to do after. And then Kevin and I have a podcast that's kind of been on hiatus for a little while called Your Favorite Ants, because we realized people were DMing us all the time with questions that like you would ask your favorite internet ants. So that's kind of how we became that. And then I have one that I'm bringing back soon, which I'm excited about, called Making Spaces. And that's one that I do on my own. I had a co-host for a little while, but it's on my own now. And it's just about kind of the spaces that we make, both literally and figuratively. The funny part is, guys, I had this podcast for several years, and then ABC came out with a podcast called Making Space.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
You know.
Can I tell you how irritating it is every time I hear that ad? It's on a million podcasts.
A million times. And it makes me angry because I'm like, that was the name of my show forever. It's the name of my business. Anyway.
Yeah.
Is it like some like home show, or is it the same?
No, they talk about literally making space for people. It's like almost exactly. It's almost exactly my kind of the things I do. So it's a little bit weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you though, I have some solidarity. You want to know how many religion podcasts that use some alcohol metaphor exist? At least 17 that I know of. They don't last that long, but every time they do, I just get irritated. And I'm like, come on. And some of them, it will use one, like a variations of mine, like craft theology, homebrewed
Ooh.
theology instead of Christianity. Like there's this list of them. And I'm just like, come on. And I would complain, except that I'm like, look, I have perseverance of the saints. I'm 2 months from 15 years, got over 1,500 episodes. I will outlive you. That's what I tell them.
Oh, you're a 1 point Calvinist in that way?
Yeah. Perseverance of the zest.
Can you do trademark on podcasts?
You can't, but they also, so she's making space because mine's making spaces.
Oh.
So she cannot be making spaces because mine's on Apple and Spotify and everything. So you can't have the exact same name.
There you go. So I own URLs for a number of these podcasts. That's why their podcasts don't actually go. If you would type their names in, go to their podcast, because I bought the URLs years ago. Anyway, so tonight, here's the idea. After being encouraged from some of the other speakers who I was hanging out with this weekend, I was with Diana Butler Bass and Grace G. Sun Kim, Reggie Williams, Podrick, the poet, who was awesome, and we might have talked about Tolkien until 1 a.m. And Brian McLaren and such, but. We were discussing as I was getting questions people sent in. You want to know what the main topic, like 90% of the questions, suggestions, and topics were when they were like, oh, we're talking about bad theology? Let me see if y'all can guess what it was.
White dudes?
And not just all of them, though.
Not all of them, but
just the straight ones.
Just the straight ones.
Oh yeah, okay.
Straight white dudes. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah. So I was asked. This came up at a dinner, and Ilia Dilio, the Franciscan nun, and quite awesome.
What a great name, first of all.
Yes.
I was gonna say.
I know. I love it.
I didn't want to make it seem flippant, but I was like, "That's pretty sweet."
That is my friend got married and went and became Marie LaBee. And I feel like this is as good as that.
Well, in one of those conversations where I'm the only guy at the lunch table, I heard one member vent about how difficult it is for guys to host anything if patriarchy's on the menu, because they keep having to reframe and interject and explain things because they're semi-apologetic, which makes them look like sad puppy dogs, but also not fully understanding. And they wish they could just mute them. But if you're the only guy, they don't feel like muting themselves, for your feelings. And then I said, well, that's obviously why tonight or Sunday, I'm just going to let all the not straight white guys discuss the bad theology class. And then I texted Sarey and was, are you cool with that? And I was like, do you think you could fill up time discussing bad theology in the wake of patriarchy?
The three of us are not capable of talking for that long.
No, absolutely not.
So for everyone on the stream, I'm going to disappear, but I'm going to run the cameras and stuff and follow the chat. So if you have a question, type question at the front, colon or whatnot, question. I'll collect them all. And if y'all get done sharing stories, theologizing about bad theology and patriarchy and the whatnots, and you want a question, holler at me. But apart from that,
Peter just sort of ended the show by we talked about bad theology that's male, and Jordan Peterson was just a Peterson question mark. There it is.
Was that triggering? Jordan Peterson. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to disappear, and Sarey is going to, take over as the driver of sorts. So I'll see you all on the other side.
Aw.
Sarey, I love your Zen.
I'm just getting centered.
I know. I was I need to do that before my classes. It's just really...
He was like, "Can you run this rodeo?" Like an hour ago. And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I like slept all day. I didn't really eat." And but
I'm
like
ready.
I'm like, but I'll like make it work. And also it doesn't seem like it'll be that hard to keep the combo going with these people.
No.
So. And I know that
First
we
of all,
get
we
along.
love you. Second of all, it's me
True.
and Sarah, and I saw Sarah do her podcast, and I'm pretty sure we could talk
Leah and I can
Oh,
talk.
yeah.
It'll be great.
well
Oh, yeah.
beyond like the whatever time this is.
The
supposed to-
allotted time.
I'm just really glad you guys can't smell me. So what I told them before, the reason I look like this is I literally was underneath a 1973 trailer, Airstream trailer until like 20 minutes before now because, well, for lots of reasons. So I smell like gasoline, which is not cute. Not that you have gas in an Airstream. It's just for whatever reason, all the products that you use related to it smell like gas.
Well, you look lovely. You don't
I
need
have
to
dirt on
worry
my
about
face
that.
too, but
I
keep going. I'm
No,
excited about
it's
this.
okay. The quality's not that great, so we can't tell. It smooths everything out.
Perfect.
I know. If you could see the back of my head, you would
Yeah.
see that I'm just gonna stay like this, and you'll be fine.
Perfect. I'm excited about it.
Okay. How are you guys doing otherwise? How are you doing today? That's my first question.
Ooh.
Sarah, I feel like you should go first because I had a real low key day today. So
You know, I'm doing pretty well. It's always a little stressful. So friends come in town to help work on my Airstream, which is so great and so awesome. So my friend Derek Wilson, actually from Vancouver Island, Canada, came to visit me to work on the trailer. He's a fantastic plumber. So he came to work on my trailer and do some plumbing, but nothing ever goes the way it's supposed to go. And then like a bunch of my friends showed up today to work on the trailer. And then it just like, I don't know if you guys have heard, California's just like decided to rain aggressively for the last like,
I have
so
heard this. Yeah.
to the point where I was actually at the store, and my friend who was working on the trailer texted me, what do we do? Animals 2x2 are showing up. So I think, and I was like, funny. That's funny. So I think it's just sort of been a bit of a stressful day. And then full disclosure, I was on my way home, and why it was later than I was planning on being. It was a friend of mine, very good friend of mine who watches my dogs. Dad was having some chest pain. So just good thoughts for them. My dear friends. So I feel a little frazzled, but excited to be here with you guys. So
okay, we can take some deep breaths, centering breaths. And Leah, you're cool. You had a chill day.
I kind of hate going after Sarah, and that's
sorry.
No,
That's
we
okay.
all have those days, and those days I think are important, just like the chill days.
Yeah.
And so today, I live in North Carolina. I am historically from another state, but North Carolina is really big on like the outdoors. It's sort of like, and I've seen some people that are from North Carolina in the chat, but they really, there's a big focus on things like hiking and North Face and breweries and getting a dog.
I'm really into the fact that you think breweries is an outdoor activity. I agree with you 100%.
I have my standards of outdoor. What do you do after you hike? You got to go to the brewery, right? I mean, it's the point, I think. Anyway, so I'm trying to embrace my inner North Carolina, and today was like a really good kind of example of that because we took the dog hiking, and then we went to a brewery.
Cool. That sounds like a good day.
It's a good day.
Cool. I think that we should start because the theme is bad theology, and the theme of the class is experiencing God. And we don't have to connect those things right away, but so much of how we experience God is shaped by our, theological imagination, and the bad theology can shape our imagination in such a way that we have bad God experiences, and it can be really hard to parse things out and separate things out later in life if you're trying to have a healthy spiritual life and you desire connection with God, but your idea of God is shaped by all this bad theology, which we can talk about what that means in a little bit. And I was going to say, even after you've changed your theology, it can take a while for, like the neuroplasticity. I saw we have some psychologists in the room, but, that idea that like even though you have kind of the knowledge up here and you've changed your opinions, to really change what your like body feels and knows can take a while for it to like trickle down and to like really feel a difference, or, you know, be able to engage or whatever. So I think we should start with you, Leah, because you did your book. When's your book come out?
April.
It comes out in April.
Yeah.
And it is called
Bad Theology.
And that's why I love when you and Kevin met, because Kevin wrote a book called Bad Theology Kills. And I was like, yes, these two are going to love each other.
Yes. Yeah. And I was just like, oh gosh, I didn't. And then he was like, no, like, we're going to kill this together. We're going to do not use kill, but we're going to do this together. And I think that's quite right, is sort of dismantling stuff collaboratively. Like, you don't, you know, we've been fighting each other for not me and Kevin, clearly, but, you know, they've pitted people who are what I would say kind of fighting against this sort of patriarchal powers. They've pitted people against each other for so long, and I'm like, no, let's dismantle this whole thing together. Let's do it. Like, I make about 10 cents per year on these books. Like, it's not going to make me famous. So let's do this together. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if the question there, but I think one of the things that I first started writing about when I was
I wanted you to, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to know why you wrote your book, and who is it for, and what do you hope kind of dent it makes?
Totally. Yeah. No, that's great. Which people from Beer Camp will know, is that I grew up Southern Baptist. I felt a great call to ministry. So I would actually kind of fit into your world, Sarah, there. I was a minister for some time. But I grew up feeling that way. And I grew up really, you know, in ways different from some folks. And that's why Kevin and I, it was awesome on the podcast to talk about his experiences too, is I sort of felt like I felt this intense calling, but my body didn't fit the correct form that it was supposed to fit in order to be a minister. And for me, like, people always say, oh, just go to a different denomination. Well, I grew up in Georgia. There wasn't really, that was sort of the option.
Like, what flavor of Baptist would you like? Right, and there's like one or two Methodist churches, but they're really Methodist churches, if we're honest.
Right. And if your whole family goes there, it's not like, you know, you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to venture over to the Presbyterians or whatever. So who I wrote this for was for me, for that little girl who felt really, you know, completely confused. It wasn't even that I felt cognitive dissonance. I was confused because I felt this real calling to do stuff in this world. And yet I continuously got told that I couldn't because of various, you know, biological stuff. So you know, that is who I was writing it for. What do I hope to accomplish with that? I really hope to accomplish this idea that we can start talking about, and people have done this before, as I've said, but that we can start talking about the fact that the theology you grew up with that influenced you so intensely. Like, I was 100% certain if I had sex, I was going to burn in the hellfire. There was no part of me that did not think that that was real. There needs to be other voices that come in and say, like, there's other ways to view this, you know, because that was deeply influential to my whole existence. And some people may still think that, and that's okay, but it's good to have a collection of voices. And I think that's the hope that I have with the book, is I don't want people and young people to have to grow up and to think that, you know, if I drink a glass of wine, I'm, you know, like all of this stuff that was in it. And I sort of say it flippantly, but I have to say it was in my brain. Like,
in your talk at Beer Camp, which people will get to hear this week, you characterized it as traumatic.
Oh,
you
absolutely.
had to reckon with, like, it took you a while to recognize that it was trauma, because there's some kinds of trauma that happen in slow motion over time in this sort of cumulative way, right?
Yes, and the thing is, you think it's just life because that's your life, and And you
Yeah.
also get told continuously that this is what God has said.
Right.
And that's a real, you know, and it's not, anyone's fault that this was our whole life. It just was. And those of you who grew up in this world can testify to that, is that we went to church on Sunday, we went to church on Wednesday, and this is what we thought. And this was just life. And so I just hope a little bit that I don't want to like completely tear down the religious system, because I'm a part of it. I'm still in it. But I would like for people to hear other voices.
It's
Yeah, I
pretty
think that's.
interesting.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, Sarah. No, you first, Sarah.
I was just going to say, I think it's one of the things that we don't even realize is how much the way we even look at the divine is defined by what we grew up in, and then what we were trying to sort of, I think humans are always walking into space wondering, like, do I belong here? I think is the first question we ask. So for me, I moved from Canada to Mississippi when I was 14. So 13, turning 14. So I think the question I was asking, like most teenagers do, is like, do I belong? And so the question of what church do you go to is like the first question people ask you, like, not like, like, do you go to church? Is what church, what brand of church do you go to? And we had been a part of the United Church of Canada. And so I grew up with a lot of Christian influence, and my family attended church at the time and still attend church. And I really didn't realize how much that time period of Christianity that I experienced as a teenager, because I was really like, I really bought into it because I wanted to be a good Christian and a good American. I wanted to fit into the systems around me and be a good Southerner. And there's so much dismantling that you don't even know how much of it is sort of woven into your own language, into your own understanding of what you can and cannot participate in. It's fascinating. Sometimes I find myself even having thoughts that I'm like, well, I don't even think that, but it's just so woven into everything that I've experienced. And so, yeah, I think this sort of conversation about like what what other voices can we hear, so that you're right, our brains have neuroplasticity. We can have some new neural pathways that teach us maybe and help us feel confident and comfortable in other spaces. But there is this sort of rub that happens when you're like, wait, I think the first time that I heard God, she language around God, I was very like, what? And then asking myself, did I really think God had a gender? Like, but it's just one of those things where you're, oh, okay, I'm so used to hearing he. It's just sort of all that stuff that I think bad theology. And you're right. Sometimes I don't think it is intentional, and sometimes I think it's absolutely intentional. In the same way, Leah, that when I saw you be just so gracious and so excited for the work that Kevin was doing, it's important because I think, particularly for women or people who exist in the world in female bodies, I think we're taught that there's very little space for us. And so then what happens naturally is this competition to take up that space. And that can really be, also when you get into academia or you get into ministry or get into it's this really weird competitiveness. And then as women, we're taught not to act like we're competitive. So there's this weird vibe where when your friends do well, sometimes you're like, but what about me? Which is like the weirdest thing. But I have grace for myself and grace for others when that happens, because it really is this sense of like, there isn't really enough for all of us. And the idea of scarcity is just, again, bad theology. But it keeps us behaving, because there's only so much room for so many people. We want to be, in line so that, that space is made for us. Anyway, that's a long way of just saying, Leah, I agree with you that there is this really important space making for other voices to be able to speak into our lives so that we can make new connections.
Yeah, and I think we're told to fight over these little pieces. And I think what you just said is quite right, is people who are maybe not, who would typically have been maybe in ministry historically, are taught that we have to fight each other over this. And that's a false narrative. That's incredibly false. It's this idea that we have to just, yeah, morsels. Exactly, Julie. That's right. We have to fight over these little parts, and that's not right. That isn't I remember someone telling me one time, women can't be ministers because they're too emotional. I went on, right. I went on to work at other universities, and I witnessed so many conversations. And again, I'll be very vague about all of this, but where I was just like, I'm the emotional one. Like, because that's not maybe what I'm seeing acting out here in real life. So, and even that idea that you have to limit your emotion to be a minister, I think is so gendered and
Yes.
ridiculous, honestly.
Well, and
So-
even policing your body, something that took me a very long time. So we are welcome to be ministers within the United Methodist Church, but it took me a really long time to share a story where one of my superiors called me in and told me for a half hour how great I was, right? And you know when a shit sandwich is coming, right? And so you're like, all right, okay, I'm doing a good job, and I'm waiting for the butt, and the butt came, and it was but the way you look is dangerous. No woman would trust you with their husband or boyfriend. And more people pay attention to the length of your skirt than the words coming out of your mouth. And I think you're a genius. And that was the most shaming experience. And the worst part of it was coming from a woman who was higher up. And I think it's this really interesting thing where I was someone who struggled with eating disorders when I was younger, still have body issues, like all this sort of stuff. And so to hear that my body was bad was like, oh yeah, I know that one. I know that tune. Absolutely. Like purity culture. I love it. That makes sense to me that my body would be the problem. Totally. I agree. Boobs are terrible. So it was just this like really interesting and hard thing because I had bought into the living very like pure and holy and trying to follow all the rules. And even if you follow all the rules, you still have to continue just to go police and get into this very tiny box. And then you're like, I don't like this. This feels very like this doesn't feel like the divine at all in any way, shape, or form. That seems so expansive and so yeah.
And also, where's the theology on that? I mean, I don't, you can debate Paul's writings and you can debate a lot of things, but, it's one of those bits where, Sarah, you'll appreciate this, but both of you will appreciate this. But so my first gig in the church was I was a youth and children's minister in a Southern Baptist church. And I came, and I thought, because you were talking about the body, I wore a black shirt and black pants. I thought, okay, that's going to cover me as much as possible.
No one can have a problem with that. This is literally what priests wear and nuns.
Right.
I'm tracking. I'm doing it.
But you've met me, and not to be gratuitous, I need a lot of black to cover what's happening. So, so I did that. Well, when, so I went and I did the ministry and I did all this kind of stuff. Well, the people who are in charge, the deacons, they said, we need to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. So we get together, we have a meeting, and they're like, we think you need to wear skirts and not pants because you don't need to wear pants in the church. And I said, okay. So I wore a skirt. Well, then I get called the next Sunday and I wear a skirt to the knees with tights and shoes. We think your skirt needs to be a little bit longer. It took, I kid you not, probably 5 Sundays and me sitting in the midst of all of these men deciding what I could wear to
oh my God.
church.
That is just...
We went through, there was long skirts, there was knee-length skirts with tights, there was me coming completely covered. There was not an inch of my body that was shown except for my neck, my head, and my hands that first day. But they decided that pants weren't right to wear trousers if you're British.
And then you're like, maybe I'm not.
And I tell this story because I'm like, what was one theological about this, and two,
right.
what are we hiding? Like,
yeah,
what? I mean, I don't know what. Anyway, So, because
are we
honestly,
saying?
the long skirt showed more of my body than the pants, but it's so funny how we kind of make these sort of sociological caricatures theological, and I think that's the troubling bit, is that I was 20, maybe 1 at the time I got that job, and I'm sitting here with all these adult, quite older gentlemen who are just sitting here staring at me, deciding what I could wear and what I couldn't wear to do ministry, which I thought was interesting.
Well, and they're not complaining or even suggesting that the way that you look at God is the problem, or you know, that you're somehow being scandalous in your conversation, whatever that might be. It is entirely embodied, and then
Right.
of course it is. You know, I think Edward said, emotions are the part of the way I experience God, right? If we experience God through or we kind of separate our body from our experiences, almost in a Gnosticism, right? Like, and yet our bodies are a problem. It's cognitive dissonance of like, if this person had called me in and been like, hey, like, you are against penal substitution and we are like all the full way, like, I would have been like, first of all, that word always makes me laugh because I'm about this mature. But also, like, that could be like a starting place. But to say that there was something wrong about my very being was like, you know, the thing that was fascinating, because what was interesting was it worked. I had shame. I had about a year where I didn't even talk about it until I was actually on a podcast with my friend Hillary McBride. And she brought up she brought up body stuff. And I don't know why I told the story. And then immediately felt like I shouldn't have told that story. But it's, you know, everything is embodied. The way we experience the world is through our bodies, right? And how do we believe in this, like, idea of the sacred is ordinary and the ordinary is sacred, and God is all in all? And we say that, and yet we try to like separate theology from embodiment. And so I think that's a part of bad theology.
Yeah, I was talking to a theologian earlier this week, Krista McCurlin, she was at St. Andrews. I don't know if you know her, Leah, but we were talking about that, and you talked about how, like, you know, practical theology is like at the bottom rung of the theological academy, and the stuff that's at the top rung is the most conceptual, disembodied stuff, right? Like the systematics and like, what is the what's the divine math problem of the Trinity supposed to look like? You know, like that's the stuff that's like the most revered, esteemed forms of theology. But then you get to the practical stuff, and that's like, and we were talking about that, and I was like, that seems like a patriarchy thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like something maybe related to some old Greek guys.
I mean, if you want to see patriarchy, I don't know if there's a place more akin to ministry than academia.
100%.
I mean, they just took those ideas and transferred them into the world. And you know, the danger in that is that in academia, especially, they say they're speaking for God, or at least know little insights into God. And I think that's, you know, of course you have that in ministry, but then you're teaching the next ministers when you're in academia. So you're teaching this next generation to also have that. There was a couple questions. So I'll say, John, were they all deacons? I will say, because the Baptist Church is quite heavy on the deacons. I believe they were, but I could not like 100% confirm that. But the majority certainly were. So I did want to answer that.
I love that, heady on the deacons. Like they were just like handing them out
at
the door.
I didn't want to be flippant about it, but they really just, they love a good deacon. It's
the
like
church
the Presbyterians love a good counsel. The Baptists love a good deacon.
When I was a kid, our church had female deacons, and it was a Presbyterian church, and then they decided later on that wasn't okay, and so they got rid of the female deacons. And then there was nothing. I mean, you could teach Sunday school, obviously. I remember I was like, when I was a teenager, I was obsessed with theology. I always was like standing, listening to the theological conversations. And if there was like a circle of guys talking about theology at church, I'd go and I'd like get in there and start listening, And I remember walking in mid-conversation, and I leaned over to someone I knew pretty well, to this guy, and I was like, what are you guys talking about? Because I couldn't quite pick up. It was sounding kind of political or whatever. And he says, oh, well, you know how like women can't be the head of a household. And so they also can't be the head of the church. They can't be pastors. So we're talking about whether it's okay for women to run for office. Like, does that naturally follow? Because there's like this 3 spheres of 3 institutions thing. I don't know where it came from, and I was at the time I was like, okay, makes sense.
Well, growing up, I could
Yeah.
be a minister to children and youth, but I couldn't minister to adults. Now, to me, talking about bad theology, where's the theology in that? I'm not sure I remember a story about that, but also children and youth, you instruct me, you say I can influence them, but not the adults, who a lot of times have solidified thoughts already in their minds. I just thought it was because it was seen as being, I suppose, a lesser ministry, which I don't agree with
Right.
at all. But that's what it seemed to be. And, it always strikes me as so funny because these are the people who are going to be leading the church, the next generation. And you're letting me just influence the hell out of them.
Right. Well, I like that you made this. You had a whole slide about how all theology is practical theology, and if it's not, it just kind of becomes something else. I'm paraphrasing you wrong, but I really liked that.
Tripp especially loves that when I tell him. As a philosophical theologian, he really likes it when I tell
him. Well, I think we should get into some of your bad theology criteria. Do you want to talk about some of those? I don't know if we have to get into all of them. I don't want to spoil your whole book, and I don't also be mindful of time, but can we dive into some of them?
I would hate to self-promote. I'm trying to take Tripp's, like I'm notoriously bad at this, the self-promotion thing, but I'm really trying to take a page out of Tripp's book of not self-promotion, but just being out there in the world. Like I texted him and I was like, did you start in like multi-level marketing? Is this like, because you're just so excellent at this?
Yeah, he is.
Anyway,
he's pretty good at marketing for a philosophical theologian.
I know, right? I don't like to admit it, Sarey. I have to say, it pains me as a practical theologian. I should go ahead and be better at it,
And I keep wanting to remark that, so the term bad theology, the people who throw around that phrase bad theology are the people with the worst theology typically. Like people who, can you hear a guy saying like, oh, that's just bad theology? Like I've probably heard that thousands of times in my life, always coming from now the folks who I consider having the worst.
Well, you have to decide what theology is, right? So even in our definition of what theology is, because Leah, I'll tell you, people who define theology as just a mere understanding or study of God, that doesn't sound very practical, right? And so if we talk about a bad study of God, then that's a different sort of thing than saying like a bad understanding or complete notion of God. So I think we almost have to define our terms of what theology is.
Yeah,
for sure. And it's all, people oftentimes throw around the imposter syndrome thing. I could not feel more imposter syndrome about this book because I both define theology and define bad theology. But what gave me a lot of sort of confidence in it is that guys especially have been doing this for a really long time. Like there's a lot of people who've been really confident about doing this. Just do it. You train for it. You got the degree. Like just go out. But there's still that little Southern Baptist girl who's, in my brain and I'm confident in a lot of things. Like I really am pretty good at basketball. I'm confident in that. I'm pretty good at board games if you get me cornered. But like I want
to know who's cornering you to play a board game. what is happening in North Carolina that you're
North
getting
Carolina has a very aggressive board game culture.
Clearly. That's the toxic
Wow.
theology we should be talking about. And for some reason in my mind, the person that was getting you in the corner, by the way, was the Monopoly guy. Just to be honest, like with full monocle.
Look, I don't know
play
what
my
things
game.
are like on the West Coast, but on the East Coast, we play them games. But yeah, so so I think writing it, but it was very intimidating. But again, I did come up with these criteria, which was your original question, Sarey, and I talked about what I thought theology was. I do think all theology is practical theology, which is my line and forever is well. And again, not my line. Don Browning said it first, but this idea that all of these sort of kind of what I would say are vague philosophical ideas, Tripp, come out of people observing and seeing what people are doing and living out in terms of theology. So when I say all theology is practical, I just mean I think we're getting these concepts that we have developed and systematized from actually observing what people are doing in the world with their understanding of God and that kind of thing. The bad theology was a step forward from that, just saying, okay, we constantly talk about this idea of what systematic theology, and the thing with systematic theology, at least in the academy, is that it was seen as being the gold standard. You know, this is what theology is. This is what the Trinity really is, blah, 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 blah. And it's written by all the same people, name Bonhoeffer, Barth, blah, 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 blah. You know, fill in the blank, Tillich. We know all the white guys who wrote it. Unless you go into liberation theology, which is a whole other thing. That's where the people diversity comes in. But I thought to myself, if we have this gold standard of what we think, you know, true or real or systematic, whatever you want to say there, then we can probably look at the inverse of that and see where people are doing bad theology. And so that criteria came from that. And there's a lot of emphasis on justice and freedom. But there's also, because it's practical theology, I can look at kind of the action. So like, is your theology telling you that other theologies are completely wrong? Like, are the people telling you that everyone's wrong around you? Because growing up, and again, I took a lot from growing up where I did, you know, even the Methodists, dun, 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 down the road, we were like, those are some liberal crazies down there. You know, we were told that they were wrong. So that's isolationist. You know, that's saying that someone else is, because if you start to engage with someone else's theology, you start to learn different aspects. And I think there is that bit that you have to, for bad theology, you have to keep people separate. You know, you have to put them off into that kind of realm. Does it promote human flourishing? That's something. And again, that's very vague. You can define that many ways. But are you enjoying being a part of your religion? Like, that's just a question. Is it adding to your life? Are you just there because you were told to go? Or maybe it's tradition, you know? So there's a lot of these criteria that I think, those are ones that came off the top of my head. But, you know, I think it is this idea is we have to sometimes say, what is the system of religion doing for us? And this is not just because I'm a millennial and I'm like, me. But there is this sort of, growing up, I probably could have questioned, what is this actually doing? Because what it's doing is making me feel really bad about being a woman, making me feel really bad about any instinct I have about wanting to do anything like sex or, you know, because I was in the height of the purity culture. It's making me scared of God. I was terrified of God, you know, and I think at some stage we have to look around and say, you know, it doesn't have to be always benefiting me, but am I a part of this religion because I want to be, or because, you know, I'm being told to be, or I'm scared? I was scared most of my childhood being in a religion. So, and I think that's fundamental bad theology. It doesn't have to be a hand holding. We're going through like, you know, the daisy like fields together holding hands. Like, it doesn't have to be that, but like, you also shouldn't be terrified of every inch of who you are as a human, I think. So that's that.
Yeah. I'm really just absorbing that. I like that, like, just permission to ask yourself that question. Like, what kind of am I enjoying my religion? Is it what effect is it having on me and my body, my psychology? And also what kind of community is it creating? Is it a
Right.
community that's where people are flourishing? Is it a community where people are being pushed out? Is a community that cares about equity and inclusion, or has really strong in-group, out-group mentality? Justice is another criteria you had. Is it promoting justice? Like, yeah, like why can't we ask these questions? It's just
I think that's a good
yeah.
piece of it as well. Anytime you're part of something that doesn't allow you to ask questions and isn't afraid of your
Yes.
questions. I love the folks in my life that help me sort of engage and, being able to question sort of the theology I'd been given was the people who allowed me to ask questions and weren't shocked by it and weren't afraid of it. And it wasn't problematic to ask the questions. In fact, within this idea of, I was really lucky to take a class that a rabbi taught. And one of the things he said is like, oh yeah, arguing with the text within his Judaic tradition is actually worship. Like questioning it is worship. And I think the other thing is sort of like, so are you allowed to ask these questions? Because I think about couples, and couples that no longer like talk to each other are often the couples that aren't doing well. But the couples that have more questions of and for each other are the ones that are still engaged and still interested and still wondering, like, and so if we want to put it into sort of this relational dynamic, having a theological conversation or a conversation about, what does it mean? Like, does the Trinity have to be real? It seems kind of weird. I tried to explain it to a 4-year-old and I didn't like, my friend's daughter said there's God, Jesus, and Santa Claus. Is that the Trinity? And we were like, yep. I mean, like, what do you, maybe, I don't know.
Well,
and I
it's
think
made up anyway. So
right. And so, right. And then this idea that all of these things have to be sort of checked off for you to be in the right mindset. And so I also think, this idea that it isn't just about like, do I enjoy it? Because I think that's absolutely right. But is it good and creating light and love in the world? Is it something that is transformative for the better? Because otherwise it is sort of a disembodied great thoughts. Like some of the people that I know who are people who really, really want to talk about God a lot publicly in the coffee shops that I work at are often the people who aren't bringing about positive and good change. Not always. Now there is some, right? But I think that sometimes we just have to sort of ask the questions like, is it bringing goodness into the world? Is it making me a better person? Do I feel like I'm able to accept all of who I am? Because if I believe the divine, if I believe I'm created, it's kind of weird that I'm like, oh man, you really messed up. Like,
Sarah, can I ask you, like, I feel kind of, this is actually because I moonlight as a filmmaker. And some of the stories, the narratives that I like to explore are where someone's thriving in a new identity, a character, and something from their old identity sort of haunts them or comes to like that pops up and creeps up on them, and it kind of shakes them up in this new identity and causes them to question, like, how do I integrate this? Do I push this away? How do I deal with this? And with you dealing with talking a lot with ministers and being a minister yourself, do you experience in yourself and in that community of people this sort of, and maybe Leah can speak this too, like being a little haunted by like being a leader in those systems and hearing the things you used to say and the things spoke up in Bible study to say or whatever, and it just dealing with, I don't know, this is like how do you deal with that, being haunted by your past bad theology?
Well, I mean, that's the thing too, like why we created the Rev Recovery community, and we have like a Discord channel that people are so rad in, is because there aren't a lot of spaces where someone who is from who has been a minister or may currently be a minister can be honest about their faith shift, and then honest about the fact that they feel like they may have harmed folks because they were sort of saying the company line or whatever it might have been. And there's also this truth that folks who are going through a faith shift or a faith journey, and many people call it deconstruction, whatever it might be, are very angry at pastors, whether it was that pastor or not. And so you could never say to them, well, not all clergy. So imagine if you're already yourself going through a loss and fear of losing community. You were once a pastor and a leader in community, and because of your faith shifting, you feel like you need to leave that. And then the very people who you should be able to now make community with are like, you're the problem. And so I think there is sort of this need to both be honest about, I think, to Taylor Swift it a little bit, be like, hi, I'm the problem. It's me. I was, there is a lot of haunting. And so having other people who can say, and a lot of these people, by the way, have like gone and said, I'm sorry to a lot of the folks that they feel like they harmed or gave some difficult messaging to. And yet still feel this sense of like, grief that they believe so hardcore in something. And it often, I mean, I would say in our group, at least it's people who came about it with the best of intentions, right? So it's like, is your theology causing harm? Well, define harm, right? And so for some folks, it's like, I was trying to keep you safe by telling you these were the boundaries to play in. And then it turns out later, that maybe that wasn't the most helpful boundary, and maybe that harmed people. And so I think that creating a space for people to be able to talk about that is really important. And also with the awareness that like, there are pastors and a lot of former pastors who do feel that sense of like, I don't even know what to say now. And so there is a shift into how do I, when I once felt like I had a little bit of things to share. And so what do I do in this sort of environment?
And I think that was one of the things with the purity culture is at least the package that it was presented to me. And someone asked a question about this in the chat is, right there. Is it essentially bad? I think the idea that it was presented in a way that was so either or. If you did, you're going to hell. If you didn't, you weren't.
Right.
And again, this is from the Southern Baptist that I was at. Maybe that's not how it was presented otherwise. And then it was, we're doing this to watch out for you. Don't cause a brother to stumble. I have all these catchphrases. And it's like, this feels a lot more about you than me. And I can see that now, but at the time it felt very much about me, that it was this idea of that I was causing the brothers to stumble, and it was this. So is this sort of theology bad theology? I think it's bad when you start to code it in the language of I'm doing this to protect you. And I'm doing this to protect you with the consequence being that if you do it, you're going to hell.
Well, and you have no say, right? It's like, you have no, like, I'm doing this because you can't make decisions on your own, instead of understanding the totality or where it played out, right? That's the thing. That's where it's problematic, is all of a sudden we lost our ability to feel like we might know what's good for ourselves, right?
That's right. And it was just like, I wasn't interested. I just wanted to read books, and like I didn't, and this, and play basketball. As I said, I didn't really want to do, but it was one of those things where it was continuously, and it's quite right. Someone put in the chat, the guys were getting a different message as well, which I think is kind of important too, is that, and I don't like I think, yes, that's right. Nothing but nature. That's right. The men couldn't help themselves. I was reading the little thing at the bottom. They couldn't help themselves. So we had to dress, appropriately so that we wouldn't cause them to stumble. And it just felt very kind of one-sided. And again, what I always go back to is, what is the theology behind this? Where are we seeing this in the text? I don't remember "don't make a brother stumble" being in the text, but you guys can tell me if I'm wrong or not.
Yeah, because I think sometimes it makes it too easy to have rules, right? Like it makes it we don't, okay, if I do this, then doing this isn't a problem. Like instead of the heart behind it or the thought of like, what were we, this contextual piece of writing, if we totally forget that it took place in a certain time and place and what would have caused people to stumble then might have been a little bit of an ankle or whatever it might be. And this is a moving target. And so the sense is that you're never going to be holy enough, good enough, smart enough, know enough to ever. So it's just a constant striving, which really distracts you from, I think, some of the beloved work of just loving your neighbor and noticing that they're not doing well and then figuring out how to do that. And by neighbor, I mean globally. Like if we're so individual, which I mean, that's, to me, bad theology is also incredibly individualistic, right? It's like, I said a little prayer in a corner by myself and now ta-da. And if I didn't say the prayer correctly, then I need to like redo it. And I think that there is so much to be said about how are we caring for our community beyond how are we thinking in expansive ways? Is that even part of it? To sort of note bad theology.
Someone mentioned too something about mystery, and growing up Protestant, when I went to Edinburgh to work, it was really great because I had a lot of interactions with Catholic theologians, and I really loved this idea of that there was mystery, that God was mystery, and that there was a little bit of like, I think in the Protestant tradition, this is grossly generalized, but we like to have things very set out, and that this is what you do and X, Y, Z, and then you go to heaven and all that kind of stuff. And I like the sort of Catholic theology that came out that I learned there, which was quite limited, I should say, and I don't claim any sort of expertise in that, but that things were a little bit more mysterious. And it was like, it gave God a little bit more, I don't know the word for it, but just like more largeness, like there was this idea that God was a little bit bigger than our human minds could comprehend. And that was
just
okay.
A little bit.
Just a little bit, right? Like this whole thing that we put all of our eggs in the basket for is just a little bit bigger than we might be able to write in a book. And so someone just commented on that mystery part, and I wanted to really highlight that I appreciated the Catholic influence that I had.
Well, and I love that somebody said, hey, what if a pastor had got up and been honest about their poor, bad theology? It would have made space for them to feel comfortable about their shifting. And I totally agree. But then someone's response was really helpful, which is, yeah, if you recant a poor theology, you might lose your job. And congregation or denomination can't tolerate their beliefs being challenged. But I also think, what sells really well? What fills pews really well? For a little while, guys. I don't think people stick there, but it's like, I have 3 things to tell you that are going to make your life better. Right. And if I can tell you with a surety that these 3 things, if you just trust and believe, these 3 things, your life could be better. And when you are going through all the things that humanity makes us go through and that just life makes us go through, if there's an answer for that, do you know how exciting that is? At least for a little while. And that fills a pew. And you know what? That also pays a paycheck. And the hard part for some pastors is they're recognizing and realizing that, like, to do the good work in the world they may want to do. So whether that's addressing those who are unsheltered or whatever it might be, they feel like, okay, I got to give this message. This seems like I have the answer so that I can actually live out this thing. And so there's just so much going on that I don't think people realize when you're standing up there trying to figure out what to say. I mean, the best thing is now I still publicly speak. That's not how I wanted to say that. I speak at events a lot. And it's funny because since I've shifted in my ability to sort of be honest about where I am, it's really funny because I look at scripture in such a different way. And in some ways it's fun and playful to look at it in a different way and figure out how to talk from a way that isn't so like, and this is the way, this is what this means. Because I mean, for some people, you make them so uncomfortable when you're like, but it's all a mystery. You know what I mean? Like people are like, wait, I came to hear a thing That's not a thing.
Right.
And then some people are freed by that moment.
Yeah, our brains often want certainty though, or want like just clear black and white stuff. What were you gonna
They
say,
do.
Leah?
I mean, the fundamentals, like I always ask my students, I teach world religions, and I'm like, what do you think it was in the very first people? Like people were barely, we're talking indigenous people, they were barely surviving. What was it that made them turn to the stars? What were the questions that made them interested in religion, even though they were just, living on day to day? And every time students say, what happens when you die? Right? That's why because they couldn't explain it. What happens when you die? We know these people go away. They don't come back, at least in physical form. And they 9 times out of 10 will say that's what religion is the question, what happens when you die? And so, Sarah, to your point, of course it's nicer to have certainty in that, because it's the question we can't answer, and so if you have this sort of formula or this track or this pathway that says this is how you get to this lovely place, and so you don't need to worry, you don't need to stress, you don't need to do that, it's nice. And for a while it's easy to buy into, because we don't want that stress either. I want to take that out of my life. I have a stressful enough life. I don't want to think about the afterlife. But I do think what it does is it solidifies certain people's positions who give you easy answers on that. And growing up in the church that I grew up in, that was a real focus, that idea of what happens when you die, if you go up or down. And here are the lists of things that you need to do. And if you check box the list, then you go to the place you want to go to. And if you don't, then you don't. I'm sure that was, well, I know it was for me quite comforting. It's like, oh, one less thing,
Well, it's quite comforting too. And I remember coming back I'd gone to Uganda with some medical folks, and I saw folks who were living in really hard lifestyles, really hard. And I thought about like just every day having to just to make it, like every day. And I remember talking to this pastor who gave this whole sermon about how heaven might not exist, like this could be it kind of thing. And I remember just going off on him, like, if this is it, then a lot of people got the shit end of the stick. And I'm sorry, but so I both, like, out of both sides of my mouth, I was like,
that's real.
Yeah. How do if this is it, then a lot of people have that's really shitty. Like, how do I believe in that, God? So it's interesting. And again, it's important, I think, to be, I don't want to use the word, I do want to use the word playful and play with these things and allow there to be space for the mystery, like Leah said, for the mystery of like what is.
Yeah, well, I really love the human thriving criteria, and which will take like engagement with like other subjects about what actually causes people to thrive. And it might be different for different people in different contexts, and that gets complicated. Like, you think about human sexuality. If there's a new constructive Christian theological ethics of sexuality, it will have something to do with human thriving, which is foreign to purity culture, right? Like, the nonsensical thing was, if sex is the worst thing you could do, absolute worst thing you could do, it'll send you to hell, it'll ruin you for life, unless you've had this party with this ceremony where you've said these words, and then it's fine and great and wonderful, like, like that's a I don't think, can I say mind fuck on this thing? I don't, that just is, you can't make sense of that as a real human being. So, like, what could a vision, what could Christianity have to offer a conversation about what a thriving life looks like before death? And that will look different for different people, like I already said. But maybe we could move. You guys want to add to that, or maybe we should just have a more intentional time of responding to the questions that have come up?
Sure.
I'll just say yes to the questions, but also the one line I would say is not hating yourself. Because if you live a life, I'm 40 now, full disclosure. 40 years of hating yourself is a long life. And, I'm not saying I do now, but for a while I did, and I think that's the thing, whether it's sexuality or color or, gender, in whatever way you understand that, spending your whole life being a part of a religion that makes you perpetually feel not connected to God, not connected to a community, but hating yourself is going to be a really long life. And I would almost say, as a reverend doctor, it's not worth it. So that's my final.
Okay, that is like your new, as a reverend doctor, I would say it's not worth it, is my new t-shirt.
Bravo.
I want one.
All right. Okay, is this how we're doing this? Are they just going to appear? How does supersessionism, even in its more nuanced form, tend to produce bad theology?
Oh, yeah. That's so good. That's so good because
that's a good question that just popped up.
yeah, that is so good. Because supersessionism is this idea that like Christianity like replaced Judaism. Like either you got it and you understood it, or you remained in Judaism. like you got on the right team, or you just remained. Yeah. So that's the idea of supersessionism, even in its nuanced ways, right? So even like the people who like to call themselves like what are they called? Messianic Jews. I remember my friend who's Jewish being like, those are the most offended people to me, because it still suggests that I'm missing a point. And I think that what does that do is it creates the theology that says, I know more than you, and you missed it, sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to have to use my criteria because self-promotion.
Yeah.
It's isolationist, right? It's saying that, and it's also saying one of the criteria is you don't engage with dialogue with people outside because you think you're right. And there's nothing fundamentally wrong with thinking that you're right. But if you start to cause other people to feel as though their whole life in community is fundamentally wrong at a fundamental level, and that's what supersessionism is at its very core, is it's saying, the Jews have missed something. They missed that Messiah that they thought was coming. Well, he came and it's here. And, there is some sort of extreme pretentiousness that I think comes from Christianity in terms of that, because, you have this incredibly ancient religion of which half of our sacred text, if you're Christian, comes from this super ancient religion. And then you're just going to, pop on the caboose and say, we got it right. I'm a part of that tradition. I'm cool with it, but you don't need to necessarily spread this sort of belief that starts to condemn other communities. I think that's where it starts to get a little bit anti-Semitic, to be honest. And people also have been talking a lot about anti-Semitism lately. And I think it's a really important thing, because I think a lot of the roots of anti-Semitism that we see, especially in the European and American context, come from the supersessionist idea. We want Israel and we want the Jewish population in as much as it helps us, and I'm not saying that's what I believe, but I'm saying historically that's the way a lot of Christians have come about with Judaism. I had a relative one time, a distant relative, say, I think the Jews are going to heaven.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, keep in mind I'm from Georgia. And I was like, I am not even sure how to answer that.
That was her hot take. Their hot take.
Right. So I think in that way, it's just it's honoring people and saying, look, we believe different things, but like it starts to be a bit different when you start to say you missed it, you're wrong, and especially being a practical theologian, if that starts to practically mean that you're going to go do some act of violence against some group because you are that anti-Semitic. So that's my thought on it.
Someone's asking, how does bad theology contribute to the rise of Christian nationalism? Can I just promote a book that my dear friend wrote called Preparing for War? This is an incredible book about Christian nationalism. It's coming out pretty soon. And it is really good. I went to a lecture because I'm a nerd the other last night on a Friday night. Who doesn't go to a lecture? I went to a lecture on the idea of basically bad theology is the reason there is Christian nationalism. And I would say supersessionism is part of Christian nationalism.
Oh, for
Right.
sure.
The new
Yeah.
Israel. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And Diana, they asked author Sarah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say it. Yeah, Brad. I'm like, I just said my friend. And so you guys should know. Bradley Anishi. I almost said his name incorrectly, but actually I got thrown up that his name was Bradley because I know him as Brad. But Brad Anishi, Dr. Brad
Bradley.
Anishi, he is a fantastic writer and speaker. He has a podcast too that would be helpful called Straight White American Jesus that talks about Christian nationalism.
And Diana Butler-Bass and I did a panel with the New Evangelicals, if we can promote other podcasts on this podcast,
Totally.
at Bear Camp. And we talked about Christian nationalism. She took the historical perspective, and I did some theology. I mostly, if you could have seen us in real life, it was mostly him asking questions and me being like, please answer. Diana Butler-Bass.
BBB.
She's
I know,
amazing.
and I was just,
Yeah.
but we do. There's a session on that, and I'm guessing it's a part of this as well. You can get a hold of that.
Yep.
Oh,
It was a great session. I was sitting in there. It was so good.
Tripp put the link there.
It was so fun again because it can seem sometimes like we're all just in this sort of like hippie cult that we just love each other, but I had the best time. It was my first time there, and just sitting next to her and actually having a conversation with her that was like gracious, and because I was just like, I don't know anything about his, and her just being like, no, go, it was such a nice alternative to some of the higher academic stuff that I've been to. It's nice to have a collaboration. Oh, here's another question. Oh gosh, penal substitution.
There it is. I'm not gonna giggle. I'm not gonna do
it. Away.
Good. How do you understand Holy Communion and why Jesus died? Oof. Guys, we do not have enough time for this one.
There's a lot of different thoughts about why Jesus died. And
that's a big one.
It is.
It's hard because
that's only one theory out of many.
Yeah. And do we ultimately kill what is good? It kind of goes back to the idea, do you think God planned to murder God's son the whole time? Like, is that like the beginning of time? Because that God really sucks. I like the whole idea of like, I'm going to make these people, they're going to be kind of shitty. And then I'm going to murder my own child so that they're less shitty because I'll only see him. Who is also me. Like, by the way, I recently explained Christianity to my agnostic friend, and it was a hoot, really, actually, because I was like, and then, and he literally said, I thought you have degrees in this. I was like, I sure do. I don't know how to explain it. You know what? I think for me, Holy Communion, even though penal substitution isn't something I'm into. I don't know why that makes me laugh. Understanding Holy Communion still holds mystery for me. There's this line that says the company of saints. And this older lady told me that she had read somewhere that this other person, when they heard like you're taking a meal with the company of saints, she thought of her husband, and now she thinks of her husband. When she takes communion, there's a sacred space of all that have come before, and the meal itself becomes something transcendent, right? So Holy Communion to me still has goosebumps, still feels sacred and important to me, and I can't necessarily explain it to you, which is why it might be a mystery. And then why did Jesus have to die? Guys, I have so many thoughts that I just don't want to even start peeling away. But I do think for me, it lands a little bit on this idea that if someone is an example of living a life that's outside of what the empire wants, often those people don't live. And we can just take a look at Iran right now. We can take a look at Ukraine right now to see what happens when you don't fit into what an empire is desiring.
Yeah, and there's whole books on the theology of reconciliation. Now, I looked at this from a practical perspective in terms of Northern Ireland, like
absolutely,
how they live it out. But I did also write about the abstracted versions, which some might call systematic theology. And there is a lot of stuff in there about, someone asked in the chat about the different theories. There's a lot. I mean, penal substitution is one, but then there's this cosmic battle between good and evil, right? And Jesus died as a result of this cosmic battle. And what Sarah said, indeed, about good people don't tend to last very long if they're going up against an empire. That's also an option. I mean, there are versions that we get taught, and most of the time in churches, I've noticed there's sort of a conglomeration again of different versions of the theology of reconciliation, but there's a lot of different options. It's not the only one. It's a popular one, though, and you get taught it a lot, but there are definitely...
Well, I remember, like I said, when I came, I was when I came to America, and then really like joined a youth group, and tried really hard to be like a good Christian. Started listening to DC Talk, just really trying to be a good Christian. And there was like this thing that I remember hearing it, like, when God looks at you, God doesn't see you, God sees Jesus. And again, if you're someone who struggles with feeling great about yourself, you're like, that sounds like a good idea. And that was like, Jesus died for you. And it was like, yeah, that seems like more guilt. I'll take it, And it's fascinating for me because I did not grow up in a home that's heavily that way at all. My mom's British, my dad's Canadian. To give you an idea, my parents go to Richard Rohr events together. They're adorable. And so I think there is this weird, like, why did Jesus die for you? Again, it brings it back to this individualistic, well, now I owe you something. I guess I should give more money to my church. It's kind of like that's sort of one of the things. It goes on and on, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think I'm trying to keep up with the chat. I feel like this is very like
it's so good.
Feeding into
Yeah.
Someone just wrote Jesus live for me. That's rad.
Oh,
I like
Tripp's
it.
back.
Yay, Tripp, the ghost of Tripp is back.
Well, I know I told y'all that we were ending in 5 minutes.
Well, we're having such a good time.
I'm not going to tell you to go away.
Is the guy coming in to tell us that we have to end our chat?
No.
Let me over-explain this for you.
Sarah texted me because she hasn't showered and is sitting there smelling herself.
I literally just found a piece of tree in my hair.
Is he going to tell us we have to quit talking to
him? I was interjecting because Sarah texted me.
I do have to go.
I
have a friend in town and he's sitting outside.
She hasn't even showered.
Are you going to explain to us the theology of reconciliation?
No, I'm just gonna demonstrate what you should do when the book comes out. There's an amazing chapter 5 in Divine Self-Investment written by said Tripp Fuller, and it's a beautiful a harmonization of the insights of the Korean concept Han in the deep solidarity of Jesus on the cross, like read through. Anyway, never mind. No, I'm not. But I mostly was just gonna, 1, make sure Sarah got off on time, and 2, tell you how awesome this was.
It was so great.
3, I'm opening a jar of pickles for the teenagers that are upstairs having a sleepover. So
is pickles the new popcorn?
Are pickles the new popcorn? Here's a fun thing. Alicia's on the other side of the screen.
I was going to say, I could hear
her family, the Fosters, basically every night have popcorn and pickles. And if you've never had them together, I was suspicious at first, but now I'm like fully indoctrinated. They go great. Jesus,
none of us could open it.
What in the world? And they are both low calorie things that function because one of her brothers had diabetes, and they all got used to eating it. So,
Julie, my book comes out.
Jesus. All right, y'all say things. I'm muting myself to get this open and not look ridiculous.
You get it on SCM Press. It's SCM's website, and it comes out in April. But you can pre-order it. Yeah, if you want.
Okay.
Oh, I should say I have 2 books not coming out. 2 books that are already out. I have
Oh,
another book coming
look,
out soon.
look at me.
I know, but I'm telling you this because it makes me laugh. Okay, the first one is if you look me up on Amazon, because my my publishing house no longer publishes my books. That's a whole nother story. But if you look me up on Amazon, there are 2 Sarah Heaths. One of them is a cat psychologist. That's not me. So just so you know, and there's also another one. Someone else looked me up on Amazon, and a very raunchy romance novel writer is also named Sarah Heath. But I'm Sarah Heath, who wrote What's Your Story? Seeing Your Life Through God's Eyes. And I also wrote a book called The Authenticity Challenge. And my favorite thing to say now that I am no longer with that publishing house is that they hired someone to look like me for the cover of a book on authenticity.
Oh my God.
You're
There's
welcome.
a lot. Thank you, Sandra. That's really sweet. Thank you. There's another Leah Robinson, and she does I think muscles. She's like a doctor of, what is the doctor of muscles?
She does muscles.
The doctor of muscles?
She does
That-
like what do you call the
A
muscle?
muscleologist.
A kinesiologist.
Yes.
Okay.
Sarah, you're so smart.
For a second, I thought you were talking about like a influencer. You're like, yeah, when people Google Leah Robinson, it's like someone's like, here's how you work your traps. Ah.
No, that's Leah's next one.
Have you seen me? I'm literally a stone. Look at this.
Your trap. Well, we can't see
We
you
did the
because
authenticity challenge 2 years ago. Oh yeah, a lot of churches do it together. It was authentically you. The book itself
You
is
wear black,
authentically
Leah.
me.
it's
That's
okay.
funny.
I don't feel
I'm
tempted
wearing black
because you're
because
wearing
I've been
black.
scarred because I should wear black at all times.
Well,
Sarah was saying something about her book. You had a
Oh
challenge.
no, I was just laughing because someone said they did the authenticity challenge. You brought it up on the screen 2 years ago, and it was authentically you. And I said, yeah, the interior part.
Is that based on your book?
Yeah, so it is the book is actually a challenge.
Oh,
Cool.
Yeah, there you go.
I feel
All right.
yeah, I've heard my book was a challenge to stay awake.
That's
That's
not
what-
true.
One of
That's
my
not true.
friends who's supposed to be on right now was supposed to do a review of your book, Tripp, and did not. She didn't read it. I don't
Who's
think.
supposed to do a review of my book?
I can't. I'm not gonna name and shame. I can't do that.
Oh,
Bad
well,
theology.
That
Bad
is
theology.
naming and shaming. You
Naming
could've
and
just used
shaming.
that. Naming and shaming.
Oh,
should have
she
been a
just put it in
chapter.
the chat. She just put it in the
So
chat.
sorry. I did read it. It was
Oh, she
great.
did read it. Okay, sorry. Sorry. She did read it.
This is what's called a public confession.
Christy, you truly did not
So
have
funny.
to name and shame.
Okay,
I
that
wasn't
is a great
afraid.
review. I did read it. It was great.
I know.
She is-
Look, when the
She did. She had to move from Colorado to Florida, which even culturally is a big.
I had a lot going on.
That's a lot.
look, I understand. I didn't when they asked me for the abstract a year after it was done because it kept getting delayed from lockdown because the book tour stuff kept getting delayed. They asked me for an abstract. I was like, I finished that thing a while ago. You want a summary of something that once it was done, I didn't want to read again? I'll just show up and talk about it. I'll talk about my feelings that I remember when I wrote it. You know, it's like I had to read it like so many times in a period of time. I reread myself recently when I was supposed to talk about a book, and it was written the first book I wrote, and I read it and I was like, wow, that was really good. I think I might have peaked early.
I may or may not have had my criteria of bad theology over here, and I wrote it.
And you're on the second version of Bad Theology right now, right? You're already on
Yeah.
the sequel.
I'm on the sequel.
Is there a reveal in it that
It's called
that
batter
Darth is?
theology.
It's called batter. It's called worstest theology.
Batter
worstest.
theology.
The worstest.
I just want you to know there was a moment in this. I realized that my sound effects, because I turned my screen off, weren't going through, and I was very amused by how I was using sound effects. And then I'm like, they're not appreciating it.
Oh,
Maybe it's being experienced, not as affirmation and playing along, but as being a jerk. And then I'm like,
Also,
wait,
do you like how Tripp's North Carolina comes out when he talks to me?
no,
My sound effects were not working right.
Not sound effects.
My sound effects.
we could not hear them.
but Leah, I want you to repeat the line you said earlier so I can play the sound effect, because you said the Baptists love a good deacon and definitely the penal. And I lost it, and none of y'all laughed. And that's when I realized that I should probably go repent from what happened. Because I was like, she just said repeatedly, you were talking, no. Baptists, they love a good deacon. And they're into the penal. And I was like, is this not on purpose? Because if I could have come up with a way to say that with a straight face, and I'm like, they didn't even laugh when I made the music joke. So say it with a straight face, and I'll play the sound effect I played when you say it.
Baptists love a good deacon and also a good penal.
See, that's what I'm talking about. It came on, and then and with a very straight face, Sarey's like, yeah.
She's a good journalist. She's a good journalist because she's like, yeah.
And so then I was like,
I have got to go.
My
We're
joke
just
didn't work.
literally sitting outside.
Yeah, Sarah, just go.
All right.
Just go.
Yeah,
Sarah,
go.
I love you guys. Thank you
Hey,
for
Sarah,
this.
thank you for
Bye.
showing up despite all the craziness in your life. And
Yeah.
Gladly. You guys are amazing.
Do you
I
have
love
a
the work
plug
that
for
all of
your
you do.
coffee, or do you want to plug your coffee? Or
oh yeah, people did ask what the coffee company was.
They
I
did,
work for
they
a
did
coffee
ask.
company
did.
called The Lost Bean.
That's cute.
Ooh.
And this is a guy like saying, it's all good. He's like drowning in coffee. They're amazing. The owner is incredible. And I started consulting them, and now I'm on staff for a little while. So it's been great.
Fun.
All righty.
All right. You guys are amazing.
Okay.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye,
Thank you.
Sarah.
Bye, Sarah.
And bye, everyone. Are we done?
Yes.
I
I think so.
still have more to say.
Oh, you know? Well, what is it?
I
You
don't.
got two sentences. Two sentences.
Absolutely.
Well,
I don't.
Yeah, we'll see. When we'll do something else when Leah decides to launch her podcast.
Oh.
Oh yeah, we're gonna.
Well, actually,
Christy, who didn't read your book, is the other person who's gonna. Oh no, she
You
didn't.
guys are gonna do. You're gonna do drunk theology together.
Drunk theology. Yeah.
Oh. Well,
It's gonna be fun.
Which everyone made the joke when you brought that up at AAR. They were like, "Okay, how is that different than home Christianity?"
We're gonna do. Have you ever seen what's his name, Belisario or something? He's a comedian, and he like chugs a glass of wine and then just answers your questions, and that's what we're gonna do.
oh.
The
Well,
theology
what if
company.
we what if we test it out at one of the Charlotte breweries?
Oh,
We
well,
get-
we're gonna do the book launch, Tripp.
I know that I am.
Yeah,
This was the subtle way of being like, Christy should come hang out with us when the book launch, and then y'all
Christy,
try
yes.
out the drunk theology thing, and
Christy is
then
one of us. You'll like her.
then like I tell all the homebrewed people about it and such. And
Let's do it.
I mean, I just generally support slightly tipsy theologizing.
We could. That's the name is a little less catchy, but we could adjust it ever so slightly. Slightly tipsy theology.
Slightly tipsy theology.
I will say, Tripp and I's podcast that we did together for Homebrewed. I started at like this time Eastern Standard. He started like 5 hours in the future.
It was very late.
It was like very late for you. I was very proud that you survived that.
Survived. I mean, I did edit 45 minutes out because we both said some things that may have been problematic for future employment, but the parts that stayed were still rather edgy, you know?
I don't know that I'm going to ever get employed by the Baptist Church again, guys.
Well, look, the Baptists, they love a good deacon. And and the penal.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
What about spirit-filled theology?
See, this is
All right.
why he and I went on till 2 a.m. because we just kept on with it.
Look, when it got to the confessional of things you did at youth camps, that was a special moment. But see, Sarey was a lot better, probably youth group member, right, Sarey?
Oh yeah.
Your confessional of youth camp trip things probably not as long. But
well,
I just went to Awana. I went to Awana summer camp.
I remember people talking about Awana.
Approved workmen are not ashamed.
Yeah.
You know?
Was that like a particular denomination, or was that just like?
I'm not sure, but it has strong Baptist vibes.
Yeah, it was
You know?
funded by the Southern Baptists when they got rid of RAs and GAs. Because I mean, if you think about it, the royal ambassadors for which was the binary male.
I never got asked to be that. That's strange.
Well, it was generated back in the day during the social gospel movement when the Baptists had a deep desire for a critique of capitalism and such. And if you go through all the pledges, it just has some language that might make you question a whole host of things that are probably heresies, you know, if we're current Southern Baptists. So they updated it.
You're the
And
white
they were
dude.
like,
You gotta tell us what the heresies are.
I know we got to misappropriate. We got to like, whoa. We don't want to sound too socialist. Brotherhood of all mankind. That just sounds socialist but patriarchal. Let's shift it up and reappropriate Native American language for witnessing. And there you go.
Just the fact the far right has been using like woke language is just enough to make me want to like, just appropriating it.
Yeah. Also, the word "awana" is what I say to the bartender after the 7th drink when they're like, "Are you done?" And you're like, "No, I wanna." And
oh my gosh, did you tell your kids that joke?
I mean, I may or may not have said it before. I can't tell.
It came off completely new.
It did. I could tell. It was a shiner. All right. Well, Tuesday, by the way, you all got this in an email if you're part of the Experiencing God. John Dominique Crossan's joining to answer a whole bunch of the Bible questions that people have sent in. And then you also, next week, I believe, Adam Clark, who you'll be getting the video of his talk looking at the connection of liberation and mysticism. And in the way that the legacy of Black theology helps you think about experiencing God and such. He'll be in conversation next week with us, and Tom Ord and a bunch of people have already sent questions around open relational theology and liberation, which should be entertaining. Though I really enjoyed watching and listening, which is abnormal because normally I listen to podcasts at 2.5 speed. So I just want to endorse the three of y'all hanging out again, and on the internet.
We appreciate your endorsement. We didn't need it, but we appreciate it.
Well, no, it comes out of the excess of celebration.
I know. We know you, Tripp. We love you. That's and John Dominique Crossan. I mean, you're getting some high hitters here, bud.
Well, he's got a cool accent, though. You know, I feel like.
Where's he from? I don't know.
Ireland.
Oh,
it's the Irish accent.
It sounded it.
Yeah. I mean, it's quality material. Anyway,
I need to have an accent the next time I come on.
You have one. You have my favorite accent.
Now you're just giving me compliments, but I also agree. You did go straight. You need to re-listen to that. You went straight Southern after I said something. It was pretty sweet. I
have already had comments from people listening to the podcast. They were like, "Hey, the episode since you've been back in North Carolina, that twang's back."
God's country. Don't forget.
Yo, I gotta go too.
All right. Okay.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh, and next week Sarah's going to tell you about something really cool, right?
I get to do some really cool stuff next week. I have a lot going on right now.
Get better.
It's a surprise.
Big. It's big. It's a big surprise. It's 2 big surprises.
Ooh.
Okay.
All right. Talk to y'all later.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.